All right, everyone. Good morning. Hope everyone's having an amazing start to DrupalCon 2021. Thank you all so much for joining us for Open DXP Drupal-Powered MarTech session today. My name's Christina Walker-Bryant, and I am joined by my colleague, Nick Switzer. And today we're going to be digging into the concept of a digital experience platform and how it relates to marketers and open source communities at large. And before we get started, I did want to mention that our session today will be more of a fireside chat format. So more conversational between Nick and myself. I know everyone is probably super fatigued of looking at long, bulky Zoom PowerPoints after a year in quarantine. So we're gonna keep this pretty light, nice, approachable feel, and more relaxed and informal. Definitely feel free to ask questions via the chat feature. We have a great setup here, and Nick and I will leave a couple of minutes after our session here for some conversation and interacting with your Q&A. And before I jump in and get us going, just to let you all know a little bit more about myself. As I said, I'm Christina Walker-Bryant. I am currently a senior account manager at Elevated Third, and I've worked on the client services and account management in website development agencies and digital marketing companies for the last 8 years or so. And at Elevated Third specifically, I'm working with mostly B2B SaaS companies on large Drupal implementation projects. So, you know, a little bit more about myself. Nick, I'd love to kick it over to you to let the group know more about your background and your role.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the great intro, Christina. Like Christina said, I'm the development director at Elevated Third. So been at Elevated Third for a little over 10 years, been working with Drupal for like 11, 12. So a lot of in the weeds technical experience there. And I think, you know, as of late, like my role has been a lot more focused on sort of like a consultative architectural role, which I think has been really neat and kind of like what led us to this presentation. You know, because I think there's just so much tied up in the implementation of like a complicated marketing technology stack. And, you know, Drupal can be a really great tool at the center of all that. And, you know, that ends up being my role working with our clients is kind of like helping bridge the gap between, you know, what are you trying to accomplish? How do these tools actually work with like, you know, how can we use Drupal as efficiently as possible to kind of serve as that hub for a larger MarTech ecosystem? That can, you know, hopefully add some longevity, scalability, and unify your systems a lot more. So all of that said, let's jump in. So, you know, like Christina said, we're testing out the fireside chat format. We're excited to do something a little bit new at DrupalCon. So, you know, we'll just have a few kind of like prompt slides up that we've broken the discussion out into. So let's dig in. And, you know, to get started, I think like we wanted to talk just in a little more detail about what is a DXP, because I think, you know, everybody's probably seen the acronym around, everybody's probably read the Gartner definition. I think, you know, we want to pick that apart a little bit, but just for the sake of getting us all on the same page, I want to read that Gartner definition real quick. So that says that it's a well-integrated and cohesive set of technologies designed to enable the composition, management, delivery, and optimization of contextualized digital experiences across multi-experience customer journeys. So that's a mouthful, right? There's a lot there. And I think what we really want to do in this first section is just like unpack that a little bit and talk about, you know, how our idea of an open DXP fits into that. So I guess, Christina, like, what do you think? Like, let's go past the buzzword and, you know, talk a little bit about what DXP actually means and kind of like what you've been seeing out in the wild.
Yeah, let's do it. I think, Nick, you already touched on something interesting, right? As marketers, we have these big, sexy buzzwords that, you know, are all about branding, but at its core, how do we simplify this? And I think let's take that acronym, break it down. Digital experience platform. It's not really prescriptive of anything, right? What is this getting at? And I have a really interesting graphic I'd love to share really quickly with the group here. It looks a lot like a Game of Thrones map right now. I keep using that joke. I think I see Westeros over there.
It never gets old.
But here is essentially a visual of the marketing technology landscape. As you all can see, there's thousands of tools, right? And there's probably hundreds of thousands of combinations. And really what we're getting at here is the integration of these digital properties into a digital ecosystem. So the marriage between all of these different products and solutions that you see. And I think that it's important to mention from an open DXP definition standpoint that what we're doing is integrating with best in breed tools to accomplish marketing goals. And when we say best in breed, that can be absolutely subjective. There's a number of different factors. We're talking about budget, team size, marketing goals, tech capabilities, industry. The list is endless, right? And I think that this visual definitely harkens to what all is out there. It's a massive landscape. And Nick, I'm really curious to hear from you from the tech end. What are some tools that would typically be a part of a DXP?
Yeah, definitely. So I think your point about it being subjective is a good one, right? Because like in our experience, we're working with like B2B companies who have pretty long sales cycles, like pretty complex products, which I think lends itself to a specific tool set. But just thinking about kind of like the general capabilities that are probably present in most DXPs, you're talking about, things like personalization, probably a marketing automation platform, which, that could be, MailChimp, that could be Pardot, Marketo, kind of depending on your scale and your needs. A CRM, probably Salesforce, but, maybe something else. CDPs, I think we're starting to see a lot more of. And, for anyone who hasn't heard that acronym, CDP is Customer Data Platform. And that's kind of like the idea of a unifying data platform that is pulling all of your different analytics tools and marketing tools together and making that data available in a single consolidated place, which is kind of a neat idea. I think you can kind of go outside of some of that core stuff and start to get more into, maybe there's like some e-commerce components, in more the B2B, or I'm sorry, the B2C side, maybe there's some like POS integration, things like that. But I think, we won't beat that too much to death. So like, that all of that said, like, Christina, like, why do you think an open DXP is a good thing for marketing teams that you've worked with? Like, how does this kind of approach of like mixing and matching like enable strategic marketing?
Yeah, Nick, I think that's interesting because when we think of open DXP, I think people are thinking that you have to tear everything down, right? I've got to start from scratch. But essentially, it's actually the exact opposite. It allows you to use what you already have, and you have the flexibility to pivot and add in new approaches and build upon and enhance what you already have in place. And I think that that's really key for marketers, and especially in the times we are in now, right? Marketing is often one of the first departments that gets cut when budgets are an issue. So having something that gives you the ability to scale, I think is really, really important. And clients and the businesses and companies that they work within, they are heavily invested in the tools that they already are using. So tearing everything down is absolutely not an option. And when I talk about investment, we're talking about lengthy contracts. I was talking to a client the other day that's working with a marketing automation platform that they're in a 5-year contract, right? That's crazy when we think about how quickly things are moving. We're also talking about monetary investment. So getting a lot of these systems stood up is often a 6-figure undertaking, oftentimes. And then one of my PC account management terms, I'd like to call rigid organizational preferences. So for example, you have people at the C-suite level that have always used X system their entire career, or they have a very strong relationship with the C-suite level team member at another company. So, some of those relational pieces that can't necessarily be broken, those things are not necessarily barriers or pain points. or blockers when you are working from an open DXP perspective. And just to round that down, regardless of those factors, an open DXP allows you to essentially optimize what you already have, right? But not only that, it gives you the opportunity to maximize where you want to go in the future and build upon what you currently have. And Nick, from your perspective, how does an open DXP fit in your world on the tech and dev end?
Yeah, definitely. I like your point about, you know, we want it to be a flexible thing. Like, we're not sort of trying to like gatekeep around what this idea of DXP can be. And, you know, we're not sort of like mandating that something existing gets torn down. Like, it really enables that agility. And I think, you know, that makes me think about like back, I think it was in 2018 or 2019 when Adobe acquired Magento. I thought Dries wrote a great blog post that had some really nice quotables in it. You know, in particular, you know, around this idea of, I'm trying to think like what the best way to compare them is, but sort of like the larger sort of monolithic walled garden type system versus a more open approach, right? And like what he said, and I wish I had the exact quote in front of me, but it was something along the lines of, we need to innovate through integration. So, you know, a similar approach to what the Drupal community takes in developing Drupal core, you know, that like we're not trying to kind of like be everything to everyone or build one gigantic thing that can do everything. We want to take what we have, put Drupal at the center of it, take advantage of what it's really good at, and integrate all of those tools together so that we can swap them out. And, you know, exactly like you said, make the most of what we have, not necessarily tear it all down and start from scratch and have to have sort of like that rebuilding period.
Absolutely.
So all of that said, I think that, you know, is really starting to get at this idea of agility, right? Like, we want to be able to move quickly. We want to be able to get things done efficiently. So that, I think, is a great transition to our second section, agility and stability. Like, are these things opposing forces? So before we like dig too deep into that idea, I think like there's some good context I'd like to get from you, Christina, just around like from what you've seen, like, since, you know, I think you're a lot more in contact with like the marketing teams and the users and things like that, where, you know, my world is a lot more kind of like in the weeds tech integration, things like that, you know, like what, you know, in your experience, like, is like a DXP necessary to support the modern web user journey kind of in our new reality of, you know, lots of devices and hopefully post-COVID soon, but in general, I think just like more remote, more devices, more web. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, no, Nick, this is a great point. In short, yes, it is. It's definitely vital, and specifically to what we're seeing from a user standpoint now. As you know, in our process, we go through a discovery phase before we move forward with any implementation project. And as we're digging into our clients' businesses and their solutions and products, we're also very much absorbing their customer experience. And what we're seeing is users are no longer taking this quintessential linear route from a buying standpoint, right? Gone are the days where we're searching, we're being taken to the website, and then we're purchasing. Users are shifting in and out of that buyer journey well over how they've used to. So at this place, we have to meet them where they're at, right? And they are at a lot of different areas and touch points. Product, price, those are still very much key drivers into the overall buyer journey and buyer process. However, customer experiences are becoming more vital than ever. I'll give a quick analogy, but my favorite restaurant, right? They have probably like average food. The prices are not that friendly, but the experience, the ambiance, the tone, the service, all of that is exactly why I continue to come back. And I think the users are very much like this, right? And where we're beating out competitors is creating a frictionless experience. and meeting the users at all of these different touch points. So there's a need now more than ever on the marketing end just to have a highly adaptable and connected digital marketing ecosystem, and hence the shift towards the DXP approach. Nick, you mentioned agility, stability. How does that all kind of marry together, and what are some of the nuances on the tech end from your standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, integration is kind of like the word of the hour, I guess, right? Where like we're gonna really like use that as the way to tie this stuff together. And I mean, I think like that's why what you said about the user journey, I think, is a really interesting like segue into that, because like it hadn't even occurred to me until we were starting to talk about this in the presentation, you know, and put this together, that it's like, oh yeah, you know, user journeys are like way more fragmented and all over the place. Yep. And that's why, you know, all of these new tools are popping up, is because, yeah, they're more complex. And I think like, you know, that's why Drupal is a really great center point for that, because that's hopefully going to be like the North Star in your MarTech system, in the sense that like that can be like the source of truth for, you know, all of your content admins and things like that. And with tools like Layout Builder and JSON API and, you know, a host of others, like kind of depending on the scale of what you're using, like that gives us the ability to quickly crank out like marketing landing pages when we need them. Or push our content out to, you know, whatever platform or device you might need to, without having to do that in multiple places or go outside Drupal. So, I mean, I think, you know, that's the agility side of it. And I mean, I think the stability comes in the sense that, I mean, just like Drupal is an enterprise platform, you know, I mean, it's proven at scale, as I think, you know, I would guess most people here have kind of heard of like a lot of the big names that use it and things like that. But, you know, I think it really serves as a great unifying factor for this.
Absolutely.
And I was going to pause for a quick second because it looked like we got a question in chat. I wanted to make sure we addressed it in context. As James was saying, can you say more about the shift from search and find customer buyer journey to what it is now? Is it that people are finding more through social networks and content marketing versus intentionally searching? Sounds like you'd have some thoughts on that, Christina. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think, James, that's a very good point, because that's absolutely it. We are finding that users are coming to our clients' websites not just through search anymore. They're coming from interacting with them on social media. They're coming through, you know, so, I mean, even I think we have a client now that's on Snapchat and TikTok. And we taking that context of the platform that they're coming from and serving them up content that is based on what we know about them from where they came in is exactly it. And having some of these tools in place, Nick will probably mention them a little bit more: personalization, smart content, which is a module that we heavily rely on. Those are some of the unifying factors that no matter if someone is finding you via TikTok, which is wild now, right? That you have information and content that is geared to where they have come from, and you're meeting them where they're at. Absolutely. That's a great question, James.
Yeah, and the personalization example is a great one, and I'll keep this brief so we can keep going. But I know, like, you know, something we talk a lot about in our, I guess, internal meetings and with our clients is like, you know, a walk, I can't even get it straight. A crawl, walk, run approach to something like personalization, or just all of this in general, right? Where like, you know, maybe with those social campaigns and things like that, you're not doing any personalization, but you're tracking those with UTM parameters, right? Like with a module like Smart Content, you can do things like create segments based on UTM parameters and then show personalized content based on those. So like relatively low level of effort, but pretty high impact in terms of being able to show users more relevant content because you know a little bit more about where they're coming from. So real life agility, I guess. Yeah. And so getting into it, like, you know, I think those are some good examples of like real life integrations, I guess. Like, you know, Christina, in your experience, like how's it actually working for marketing teams? Like, you know, can this be a reality? Like, do they actually have the flexibility to take kind of this DIY approach? Is it sort of like an in the middle thing where they're still bound to legacy tech Like what does that look like in the wild from what you've seen?
Yeah, Nick, I have a little bit of a hot take for you. So I think we're getting comfortable with the group that
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep it very real. A lot of our clients actually, and we mostly liaison between the marketing departments, so directors of marketing, CMOs, but I'm finding that CTOs and technical directors, Nick, no shade to you on the technical director end, they're making these key decisions. And these are decisions that really should be spearheaded by marketing team decision makers. And what's happening is the technology is being put first as opposed to the strategy or the marketing lens, right? And what's happening is the marketers are in a position where they're essentially chasing the technology, like catching up with, okay, here are the systems, here are the capabilities that are already in place. Let me navigate a strategy that works within the tools that I am going to be using or going to be subjected to using. And that's happening instead of really leading that process and spearheading it based on marketing initiatives and what your roadmap looks like, right? What your strategic roadmap looks like. And it's really interesting that a lot of the strategic drivers on the marketing end have been kind of taken out of some of those conversations, right? Like, who's in the room when we're deciding to go with this marketing automation tool or this email marketing tool? Who's in those conversations? And oftentimes we're finding that sometimes those louder voices in the room are specifically niche to the technical side. So I know there can sometimes be friction between the marketing side and then the tech side. So Nick, how do you feel that these opposing forces, what we'll call them, how can they really work together and come together and be productive and collaborate on both ends?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting that you say opposing forces, just because I mean, I think in a successful relationship, like you really don't want that to be the case, and I mean, I think a lot of that probably comes just sort of from traditional organizational structure of like, IT is kind of over here and they're the ones like in the server room running the Exchange servers and things like that. And marketing is over here and they're the ones selling the products. And I think like this sort of new era of marketing and tech or web 3.0, whatever you want to call it, has created this interesting role that I think a lot of people aren't really prepared for. That's kind of like a marketing developer or like a marketing technologist or whatever you want to call that. And I mean, obviously, to the point of agility, like you want to do the best with what you have. And I think like we can definitely meet in the middle, and tech can get better versed in marketing and understand the tools and what that team is trying to do. And marketing can understand their tools in a little more depth to kind of like understand the capabilities and work together to make those as effective as possible, always being led by the strategy though. Like I think that's the key. And that, again, another thing that Christina, you like blew my mind with as we were putting these presentations together, that I was just like, like it seems so obvious, but it just never really like occurred to me in my role. And, I mean, I think back to some of the work that we've done, like with our clients here at Elevated Third, that, that exact thing has happened. Like we've done things like use integrated demand base with smart content so that we can use firmographic data from demand base to personalized content and smart content. And that, that really took like a lot of collaboration for the developers to be like, oh, wait a minute, like we can pull all of this firmographic data from the JavaScript tracking object. And marketing was just like, oh my gosh, we already have an audience built around that. Like that's perfect. And I think that's a great idea of like how that stuff can work together. And I've got a whole list of other examples I'd be happy to dig into, but we'll save those for the end, just to keep things moving along. And looks like we got a quick question here too that about personalization. So James is asking, with the Drupal personalization module example, are you using Drupal to deliver through things like Snapchat? Are you able to use Drupal sort of like a headless CMS that way? That's a good question. I don't actually know the specifics of some of the social campaigns. I think, Christina, can you speak at all to like how they're managing the content, like sort of on those external sources?
Yeah, I would say that we haven't done a smart content to Snapchat actual integration yet, Nick, not to my knowledge, or TikTok, but from more of a serving up of content, or at least like what is on Snapchat or TikTok. It's simply directing them to content within the site that is based on what is being served up on Snapchat. I know that's a little vague, James. You're asking some really good questions here, but the technical specifics there, I could probably dig in a little deeper for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, like on the Drupal side, like all of the content that's part of the campaign is definitely managed in Drupal. So I mean, I think, like with the UTM parameters, like we can look for those parameters with Drupal. We can manage sort of the default and the personalized content in Drupal. The one piece that isn't connected into Drupal in that example, I think, is like the actual content that's getting pushed out to Snapchat.
Right.
So, there is still definitely opportunity for more integration there, but, agility, let's focus on, getting things pushed out quickly and, iterate on that over time.
Yeah, James is giving us some ideas for our next release, right, Nick?
Yeah, I know, seriously. And I guess while we're in personalization, we got a question from Matt here. We're using a personalization platform from one of the major Drupal partners. What sets the Drupal personalization module apart from some of the other offerings out there from third-party services? I can take that one if that's cool with you, Christina.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the module specifically we're talking about is smart content. It's, we're happy to like dig more into the details of that. Like it's an open source project that our team at Elevated Third maintains. And I think the main thing that sets it apart is just like how quickly you can get up and running with it. So, like I said, it's a Drupal module that you can install, and like out of the box, you can do things like the UTM parameter customization, cookie-based customization, and a few other kind of like browser-based options for things you might not think of as like traditional personalization, just in the sense of, you can personalize based on like mobile devices and things like that. And, it's out of the box, it's not going to be as robust as maybe like, what you might get out of Acquia personalization, which, I think it's just about like the use case. Because with Acquia personalization, you're getting the whole like tracking backend and everything like that, where with smart content, you're integrating that with other tools. So I think, to sum that up into a briefer answer, it's just like it's quick to use, it's free to get up and running, and it integrates directly into Drupal. And actually, I can throw a link to it in the chat too, real quick here in just a second, if anyone's interested. I know Nick, we are.
Nick,
oh yeah, go ahead, Christina.
Well, actually, another important comment from the client end is it's relatively low risk, right? You said we're able to kind of get things up and running integration-wise. But a lot of these third-party platforms, they are a larger lift, right, to get going. So if you're starting to think through personalization, how do you want to approach it from a strategy standpoint? Nick referenced crawl, walk, run. This is definitely an area where you can start testing and seeing what works and seeing how workflow on the marketing end moves into the actual execution of a personalization campaign. So it's a great way to start testing that out and seeing what's going to work best for your users. And it's quick.
And I know we're getting close on time. We've got a couple more questions here. So Christina, I say we prioritize questions over everything else. What do you say?
That sounds good. Yeah.
All right. So just scrolling back up, I know Josh said, I find personalization a little creepy. I keep wondering if we're building tools for violating privacy. Should we allow customers to opt in to being put in funnels rather than guessing? And I think that's a super interesting question that, I mean, we could spend an entire session on that alone. And I mean, it's a great point that, I think we are talking mostly about anonymous personalization, and like, I think we always try to strike that balance where, when we're working with our clients to build personalization campaigns where, we don't want to like go too deep and do things, get the weather for their address and, maybe say something about how the weather is, or like, use their name directly in there. I think we're talking about things that we can know more generally from data that it isn't PII in the sense, well, it's not PII. But I mean, obviously, like when we're talking about GDPR and CCPA, I think, this is data that would be tied into that kind of depending on the interpretation of the company that you're working with. So, I mean, I think it's a sensitive issue for sure. And I think something that, we are always trying to take into account. I think all marketers should take into account with personalization that, like, you want it to be helpful, but not sort of like creepy and overbearing. I don't know. Anything you'd add onto that, Christina?
Yeah, I almost think that if it comes off creepy, you're not doing it the right way. Because I think personalization has undergone a makeover, right? The weather in Denver, the weather in Raleigh, up in the right-hand corner in the menu bar, right? That's what we've been used to seeing. Or like, hello, Nick. Hello, Christina. Hello, Josh. That is where we're seeing a shift away from that. And really the personalized experience is meant to enhance that journey from a user. So let's say that you are, I'll take myself for an example, about to be 30-year-old Black woman. I've been searching for a new car. I go onto a banking website, and in the hero banner is a CTA that's talking about loans for car payments. Things like that should be very subtle, but in the context of what the user is interacting with on their journey. So the better that the strategy is executed, it should feel a little less like Big Brother and like freaky out. But that's a really good point, Josh, because that's definitely what the landscape has looked like in the past, for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you just loaded with insights. Love it. All right, so I know we're at time. I think we can run a few more minutes without getting shut down. So I just wanted to make sure we get to the one last question that Andrew asked in here, because I think it's a really good one, and I think you'll have some good insight on this, Christina. And what he said is, any suggestions on how to communicate and evaluate the benefits and complexity of each additional integration in a DXP with marketers? One common challenge is working with marketers who want to add one more integration, but the technical overhead is more than a single integration due to the web of all integrations you have to manage over time. It sounds like Andrew's been doing this for a while. This sounds very familiar.
No, Andrew, that's a really good point, because even leaning into how we were going to wrap before you all started asking some really good questions here, I think that there is sometimes an audit that's a little bit necessary. Marketers oftentimes don't know what they don't know. And that's where the collaboration with the dev and tech side becomes increasingly important, right? You have marketing team members that are coming to you asking for X, Y, and Z integration, but they often don't have the visibility of capabilities that already exist within their stack, right? And how can you all kind of work together? And sometimes it's a crossover of education, giving them a breakdown of what functionality and features already exist, and then deciding, is the juice really worth the squeeze, right? A little bit of a weird jargon there as well. But yeah, no, I think that, Andrew, we do that every day too. Like our collaboration with our lead developers on our team, and then being liaisons between the client of, is it really necessary to have, now we need a new chat feature in order for our existing chat feature to do X. And I think that's when really discussing and having the conversation becomes really important. And even sometimes just understanding what that level of effort looks like and that transparency. You'll see a lot of marketing team members probably be like, okay, well, it's not that much of a important piece to add. But yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. I think communicating is very key there.
Yep, definitely. Well, I know we're about out of time. Christina, 30-second closing words?
Yeah.
What do you say? How does everybody leave here and make this happen tomorrow? What's the first step? How do we get going?
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna unlock the keys to the kingdom, right? But I think we started with simplification, right? Let's simplify and break things down, kind of break out of these stodgy terms that we're using. But when you look at the word MarTech, right? What comes first? Marketing, and tech close follow. And what we're seeing is if we let the marketing side of things come first and be that driving force behind the solutions in that selection process, the tech side of things is very important as well. And when we see both of those sides of the business working together, owning their areas of expertise, you truly see that symbiotic relationship that results in a really healthy and effective digital marketing ecosystem. Very simple, right?
I love it. I love it. That's great. And I think we'll wrap up by just thanking everyone for coming.
Thank you all.
And we will be around the Elevated Third booth kind of over the course of the week. Like if anybody wants to continue the conversation, would love to do that. Like specifically today at 3 p.m. Eastern, our booth will be open for an hour. We'll be hanging around there. We'll have our technical director, Mike Landers, demoing smart content. He's kind of the brains behind the whole thing tomorrow in our booth at 11:50. So there's a lot more discussion to be had here. And, please reach out if you'd like to talk more. And great point in the comments. We would love for you to fill out our session evaluation as well. And we'd love feedback on just what you thought about like the fireside chat format. Did it work?
Yeah.
Did you love all Christina's hot takes?
More slides.
Yeah, more slides, no slides. But yeah, thank you everyone. And it was great to spend the first like 30 minutes of DrupalCon 2021 with you. And hope the rest of it goes really well. Looking forward to seeing you all around the conference this week.
Thank you all.
Alrighty. Thank you everyone. Have a great day.